Om Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha Akhanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksho Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. It is the apt and final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings, and the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is what is called enlightenment. Brahman is pure and perfect, and one without a second. And the revealed scriptures are the sure and certain proof of this fact. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Satyena, Om Satyena Labhyastapassa Yesa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sharirehi Jyotirmayo Hi Shubraha Yam Bhashanti Atayaha Kshinadoshaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. The Atman, the indivisible self within all beings and all things, is realized by knowledge, by moderation, by austerity, and by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it everywhere, existing in everything, even here, in this very mind and body. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana, Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu, Ma Vidrishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Brahman, absolute reality. May it protect us, may it sustain us, may it free us from fault-finding. May we not find fault with the teachings, with the world, or with what we study. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. Namaste to everyone here in the live audience and also live streaming audience. We welcome you and we extend our apologies for a 15-minute delay due to technical difficulties, as they say. Now we are here on the spot and engaging in our second class of this particular Dharma visit of mine to the Portland, Oregon ashram and our local Sangha here, who have been studying the Taittiriya Upanishad for over a year, and we've been coming to the end of it in this particular visit. I'm pretty sure we'll finish it up by next weekend's classes, 2 classes on Saturday and Sunday. However, I'm not sure exactly yet which Upanishad we're going to take up, but that will be in the decision-making process soon. In the meantime, we have these important closing slokas of the Taittiriya Upanishad to encounter and try and comprehend today. And as you remember, yesterday we went through one of the classic teachings of the Adara system that the Upanishad was relating to us, so the 5 sheaths, and how Bhrigu, Varuna's son, came to Varuna, one of the great rishis, and Varuna began to relate to him all of these comprehensive teachings about Brahman. That is, his son asked him to teach him about Brahman, and he taught him about food. Then he did austerity around food, which we looked at yesterday, some of the things we can do with the physical austerity and mental austerity and austerity of speech. And he came back and asked him again, and he said, meditate on prana. And so Bhrigu did austerity around prana and came back and then asked him to teach him more about Brahman. So actually, Bhrigu was thinking, in a sense, he could jump right to Brahman. He thought he could meditate on Brahman immediately. That's a classic mistake that most people make. Most people in this world, probably even in the ancestor room, have very little mind towards Brahman at all, because Brahman means formlessness, and they're engaged in form. They're seeking heaven. They're seeking heaven and earth, or heaven on earth, or both of the above. And they're into sportive play. However, their sportive play turns sour when they get attached to the pairs of opposites and the 5 kleshas and the 6 passions and the 8 fetters and attachment to objects and aversion to objects, lack of knowledge of their true self, non-understanding and non-participation in sangha life and sadhana, a whole host of things you could list on both hands, which then not only alienate them from Brahman and their own self, but cause them to forget Brahman altogether. So after lifetimes of that, you have a society that has no belief in God whatsoever. What to speak of faith? And what to speak of belief in faith, or faith in mere belief, no realization of their true nature as being eternal, and, as I was saying, formless. So to bridge the formless, even to get a glimpse of it, is very rare for most people. They're not seeking it. So Bhrigu comes and he's asking about Brahman. So Varuna sees the classic tendency of the human being. What's the saying there? Spiritually speaking anyway, their eyes are bigger than their stomach. So they have to learn the art of avastas. Many people make this mistake. Western society is full of pseudo-teachers of Indian darshanas and other darshanas, Buddhism and so forth, that are trying to teach the ultimate. It really can't be taught, for one thing. You are that. This is the Advaita Vedanta. And in order to realize what you are, you have to realize then what you're not. So it's going to take some detachment, some withdrawal, some dispassion, and some re-attaining of peace of mind and contentment and things that have probably been lost along the way, and that you need in order to qualify yourself to approach Brahman, to approach the formless, to get nirvikalpa samadhi, which is so rare that only 1 or 2 of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna even had nirvikalpa samadhi, that is, of the 16 that came with him. So a very rare state. There are other samadhis to have, and they're very rare as well, but they're at least a little bit more accessible to most beings. So you can see now, if you're thinking along the lines of neti, not this, that's very good. But look at how the process of the old rishis worked, prior to even Vedanta in the Vedic times, that they were considering, as I just chanted, which was from Shankara's Vivekachudamani, by the way, that Vedanta states in its final conclusion that all this is Brahman. And so how are we going to understand that when at the same time we know that Brahman can't be an object or a thing or a person or a personality? There's going to have to be some subtle philosophical and intellectual adjustments in our mind in order to comprehend such a fact. We're going to have to cut our teeth on form and formlessness and bondage and liberation. And right now we haven't even made it beyond virtue and vice yet, or pleasure and pain. So there are higher dualities we're going to have to encounter, and then when we do, we can qualify ourselves for possibly gaining a glimpse of this Brahman. So Varuna is taking him step by step. He loves his son is also his student, and he wants to take him to the realization of Brahman. That is, he doesn't think of him as his son first, he thinks of him as a soul that needs to get free. And genealogy and relations and all that is just a part of Maya. So he's looking at the person as the Atman, and he's the Atman, and Atman is teaching the Atman. Sort of like we looked at Brahmarpanam yesterday and found out that food offered in a selfless way with right knowledge and right orientation is actually one with Brahman too. In that same way, these 5 sheaths that the Taittiriya Upanishad is talking about are not to be attained and then thrown away. The idea is that Brahman is there in all of them, but it's there by degrees. So anything you see in the world of name and form is a sheath, or a sharira, or a upadhi, or a kosha. There are different words to use for that in Sanskrit. It's all containing some essence. But the essence isn't in matter, and it isn't in energy, and it isn't in thought. It's always beyond all of those. Therefore, in order to know that with a certainty, Varuna is telling Bhrigu, go meditate on food and use austerity. Go meditate on prana and use austerity. Now go meditate on mind and use austerity to do it. Now meditate on your intelligence and then use austerity to do that. And finally, meditate on yourself. You'll find that there's a distinction between your Anandamaya kosha and Ananda itself. That is, between the Jivatman's bliss and the Paramatman's bliss. And the Jivatman's bliss, just like the Jivatman's intellect, is finite. You see, it's contained in a sheath. But that sheath gets blown apart, exploded, and then all of a sudden the goldfish has been let out of the bowl into the lake. You see, as Krishna used to say, its consciousness had been contained in these, you might say, 5 bowls inside of each other. All of a sudden the whole thing was poured into a lake, and it got outside the koshas, and it found it was always one with the lake. These were limitations it took on. And these koshas then, food, prana, mind, intellect, and ego, are all contained. One is contained within the other, from gross to subtle. The body is contained within the prana, and the prana and the body then get contained in the mind. The body, prana, mind get contained in the intellect. Then the body, prana, mind, intellect get contained in the ego. And the ego was the inception of this whole shooting match. Maybe your primal error to take on a sense of individuality, to even come here in the first place, unless you could do it
in full consciousness.
Thank you, in full consciousness. That's how Vivekananda put it when they asked him, should a man be reborn? No, not unless he can do so in full consciousness. Unfortunately then, for most beings, they're having to learn this from the outside in, when the truth is always inside first and then out. I mean, look at our science, and look at our health systems, and look at biology, and look at evolution theories, and look at creation theories even. It's all from the outside in, as if all of this happened first, and then later we developed intelligence to transcend it. But actually, it all came out of us as intelligence, and that intelligence was ours in the first place. That is, anterior to life and mind is this Atman, this pure consciousness, before life and mind even got a start. So if you wanted to put it in order, life with all its biological ramifications came out of the mind. The mind was first before worlds. And before the mind there was this consciousness. Now, the system of sheaths, when you study that, kind of sets that right for you. If you're thinking opposite, or if you're thinking, if you're looking through a glass darkly. You see, just passed through Ashland on a car recently. I thought of that. I think that saying's by Shakespeare, looking through a glass darkly. So you're not really seeing clearly, and thine eye isn't single yet, so you're not knowing the truth of the matter. So Varuna is then very wise to teach his son Bhrigu, step by step, by avastas, and we do much the same thing. It's not just, well, in other words, he says do it with austerity, so you can't just tell somebody you're not the body and walk away. Hundreds, maybe thousands of lifetimes with poor upbringing. Poor upbringing means not just the problems we're having emotionally here nowadays, without getting the Dharma. If you had have gotten the Dharma, then you wouldn't have had bad parents, because the parents who were teaching you would have been dharmic, and the whole thing wouldn't have started off along the footing of misery and suffering in the first place. That's unnecessary. But let's say prior to that or anterior to that was just not getting the Dharma. And that's why I put up this chart around food and prana. It's one of Yoga Vasishtha's good teachings. And we're looking at it today in context of food, because this last sloka we ended up with in the Taittiriya Upanishad states, I have it marked here, he meditated on bliss. That was the ego, the Anandamaya Kosha they call it, the sheath of bliss, which is your personal pleasure, your happiness, your balance, your contentment, your I'm all right and everything's all right kind of idea when you're in a sattvic state. You see. And then after he meditated on bliss, then that same knowledge of Bhrigu and Varuna is founded on the highest imperium, the supreme bliss hidden in the cave of the intellect. Now we find that there's a higher intellect, or a cosmic buddhi, that Lord Buddha named himself after. I am the awakened one, I'm Bodhi, I am an awakened intelligence. So there must be a difference then between sleeping intelligence or intelligence confined inside a kosha, like our great thinkers and our great intellectuals and so forth around the world. And then an intelligence that's unbounded, like the particles of bliss I've been writing about and giving books on and giving teachings on. The jnana matra, that is, there are particles of atomic constituency, and then there are atmic particles, atomic particles, atmic particles. These atmic particles are filled with intelligence, the intelligence that comes flowing out of the cave of the intellect. So why did Varuna save to the very end of his description of the 5 sheaths, all the way up to the Anandamaya Kosha, which is a very subtle sheath, and then drop it in on Bhrigu's ear, that this was all hidden in the cave of the intellect. Sort of like, if thine eye be single. Cave of the intellect means this Daharakasha. You ever heard of the Daharakasha? Dahara means incredibly tiny, and Akasha means space. So there's this very tiny infinitesimal space that's a combination of mind and heart. And that's what he's referring to. It's the 7 or 8 references to the third eye, or to the wisdom eye, that are contained in 6 different religious traditions I found. Not just in Indian darshanas, but you find it in Christianity, and you find it in Buddhism, and you find it in Taoism, and so forth. So there's this place which Bhrigu is being led towards by his father, Varuna. Everything is hidden in this cave of the intellect, you see. And that's where we ended yesterday's class. That one who comprehends this becomes firmly established. That one commands food and gets power of assimilation to enjoy it. That one becomes great in progeny, in cattle, which was important back there. I suppose it's still important now. And in the effulgence born of sacred wisdom. Becomes great through renown issuing from righteous conduct. So gets everything, gets dharma, kama, artha, and moksha, gets all the wealth, gets all progeny, that is artha and kama pretty much, isn't it? And then based on this righteousness, this righteous acting he's getting from dharma, and will then eventually command everything and get free. That is, like we were saying yesterday, the kings, when the good kings, virtuous kings, when they have their final lifetime, quite often it's as a overseer over everything, lands and people and so forth, and then get their satiation at that point, and no need to come back anymore, unless they develop a power that is a desire for the power for domination. That would be a birth in the realm of the devas. You have this. If you control everything on earth, then you still have not satiated yourself. You'll probably take a birth in the realm of the devas, the shining ones, and the Divine Mother will give you lordship over an immensely vast kingdom of souls, which you can dominate over, hopefully benignly. And those are called heavens, or higher heavens. But this other akasha, those are akashas, but there's Dahar akasha, which is inside, which is pretty much transcendent of all those powers, of all those desires. And the one who seeks it is seeking Brahman, is seeking final immersion, seeking an end to the play. It's like kids get over with recess, you see, they play and everything, and then they skin their knee or something, and they run home to mother. So Sri Ramakrishna said it's like that, when you're over with the pleasure and pain of this universe, you'll run home to mother. And you'll be done with the play. You'll go home. So this is very important in another way too, this sloka. It ends the whole five-sheath description in that gets the power of food, gets the power to enjoy it, gets the power of progeny, and gets the power of sacred wisdom. Now, you have to take that to mean that all of this is food. You see, the mind eats too, and it's better if it eats wisdom than if it eats the leavings of pleasure and pain. You see, it's constantly brooding, in other words, on sense objects. As we were reading the gospel while we were fixing the technical difficulties here this morning, and we were finding Sri Ramakrishna talking about how the senses are attracted to their objects, you see, and then get stuck there. So the mind can eat that kind of food, can eat very mundane food, and rajas and tamasic food even, if we want to follow the teaching in the Gita by Sri Krishna, that there are beings who have three kinds of qualities in them, and those three kinds of qualities are around their gift giving, they're around food, they're around their acts. It's called tamas, rajas, and sattva. And people fall right into that vein even after their last birth. They'll come back as rajasic people. If they were restless in a previous life, they'll come back restless. You just watch and see. And of course that applies to you, so you want to attain this balance. And when you do attain this balance, you want to use it for a higher purpose. That is, when you just don't tell somebody you're not the body and walk away, is what I just said. In the same way, you can't just say there's a cave of intelligence in the heart and walk away. When you find out about that, you have to be willing to pool all your energies together, gather great strength. In that chart we had yesterday, remember? With Swamiji and his teachings, how you gather great strength and awaken the prana and purify the prana and point the prana towards the target of Brahman, like Om Danar Grihitva Upanishadam Mahastram Sharam Hupisanashita Sanjayita Ayamya Tad Bhavakatena Chetasya Laksham Tadevaksharam Somya Vidhi. Oh, did I just switch from English to Sanskrit there? Sorry. See, the two should flow from one to the other. It basically it means taking as bow this mighty weapon, the Upanishads. Take this as a bow. Fasten your mind to it like an arrow. See? Then point it towards Brahman, release and penetrate the mark. That's what the Upanishad is saying, you see. So, but make sure you sharpen the arrow with thoughts of God alone, it says. So, because if you have a dull head, it's not going to penetrate very deeply. See? It might bounce off, you see. So sharpen that arrow with thoughts of reality alone, says the Upanishad. So in that way, the point I'm really trying to make home with these accompanying teachings is that we have to look at everything as food when you study a teaching like this from Varuna. Everything eats everything else. We know that. You try and be a vegetarian and they say, you're still killing plants, you see, or something. You're still having to eat something. So no matter where you go in this world, there's a rub on whatever you do, you see. And absolute nonviolence is not possible. And freedom from war is not possible. But you still keep seeking peace, and you still keep seeking balance. And maybe you'll find that Brahman and point your arrow at it and penetrate it. Or maybe you'll realize that the arrow has always been in Brahman, you see. It's the Advaitic way, is that the mind has always been in Brahman. Everything came out of Brahman. Now it just needs to effectively dissolve itself back in. See? Let's say you were a nail. You're walking along, you see, and you left the wall that you were hammered into. And all of a sudden you sprouted little legs and arms and you started walking, and then you entered into the atmosphere and you got a little bit of tarnish, a little bit of rust on you. Then you tried to go back and fit into Brahman, the hole in the wall, you see. And all these little appendages sticking out, you couldn't quite get back in there, you see. So it's rather like that. The cave of the intellect is this hole in the wall of Brahman from which you came, but somehow you've turned yourself into a nail and extracted yourself from it and visited the three worlds, you see, using the three bodies. At the behest of Maya, taking on the 24 cosmic principles and the 5 koshas and sheaths, you see, and you sported about with them and you gathered these little accumulations called karmas. And then when you tried to get back into the cave of the intellect, you couldn't fit, you see. You had to shed some things. And hopefully you could do that purification process before you faced your final breath in Yama, you see. So in that way, we find that everything is food. So this chart here is a teaching by Lord Vashishta when Sri Ram, who was in his teenage years at that time, and almost nobody knew he was the avatar of the age at the time. Only 12 great rishis knew. Vashishta was one that knew that Ram was an avatar. And everyone else just thought he was the precious and beautiful son of King Dasaratha. So Ram asks Vashishta, because Ram has been outside the castle, you see, the Koshala kingdom, and saw suffering, just exactly like Lord Buddha was to do thousands of years later. Went outside his king's castle, Sri Ram, and found suffering everywhere among the masses, and came back a whole different child, you see, and was very, very serious and sober, and nobody knew why. So finally, King Dasaratha had Vashishta ask him what's wrong, basically, face him off. And so Sri Ram read this riot act. I think we used to call it the
divine discontent.
That's right, the discourse of divine discontent or something like that. So he read the riot act on everything in Maya, you see. So Vashishta started teaching him. And one of the things Ram wants to know about is one of the things he saw outside in his pilgrimage with his brothers and half-brothers was disease. So he said, why is this disease? What's its origin? Where does it come from? And so this was pretty much summated as his answer, what I've put on this chart. So you see mind, and first thing we have to know, because remember we're coming out of this sloka, that all is food, and we're talking about the body, energy, mind connection, right? Annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha. So all of those things have to be proven to be Brahman, and we have to know what the powers and what the contents and what the limitations of all those three sheaths are. Remember how I started off the class? Most people want to just jump to Brahman when they hear about Brahman. They think they can do away with everything. But everything they're trying to do away with is where their karmas lurk. And that's what's keeping them from getting back into the cave of the intellect. Those unwanted appendages and accumulations that are there. So when you start meditating on the body, and you start meditating as food, and you start meditating on prana as food, you start meditating on wisdom as food, then it shows up all of your limitations. It shows up. By the way, in the meantime, you're calling them my limitations, but you shouldn't be. You should be calling them the limitations of nature, the limitations of Maya, limitations of feigned ignorance, because you're the Atman, pure and perfect, all times and in all ways, but you've fallen into owning, as they say nowadays, owning different parts of the creation, you see, of the projection. But you cannot own something that isn't real. And so you're trying to awaken up to that fact, and so you can let go of everything and be yourself again. You putting on coverings and masks and koshas and shariras and upadhis and all these different chitabhasa, sankalpa, all these different names for projection and overlay that we don't really have any good words for in the English language or in any other language except Sanskrit. Because all of those words, when you say false superimposition in English, it rather communicates to you something different than by saying sankalpa in Sanskrit. In sankalpa in Sanskrit, you know seers, you know ignorance, you know maya, you know getting free. The whole thing just automatically, you see, suggests spirituality to you. See, superiority, superior spirituality. So that being the case, if you say something else in English, you think maybe it might lead you towards philosophy, or it might lead you towards some sort of cosmological precept. But basically, that's why these words are very important. So you find out that the connection between food, prana, and mind all has to do with all is Brahman, and Brahman is food. And that's what he's saying here. You get established in the power to assimilate food on all levels, whether it be progeny or cattle or righteous action or wisdom. All these things become open to you and you become the possessor of them. This is how you fulfill yourself and how you can then, in all good conscience and with perfect detachment, renounce the whole shooting match and back off from it and be yourself again. And there's a great bliss in that, which is being suggested to you here by the Anandamaya Kosha. That's why the final Kosha is rather a doorway. You see your ego, you see what it likes and what it's attached to and what it has to let go of in order to get to the bliss of Brahman. Bliss of the ego, bliss of Brahman, two different things. I used to describe it as, if a person got so involved, not evolved, but involved back into the cosmic process, and they reached a state where they could have a vision of the Trinity, right? Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara. And they found out that the Trinity is standing with their back to the light of Brahman. And all the light of Brahman is coming through the Trinity as if they were three great crystals, and the light was reflecting through them and turning into worlds down the spectrum, the lokas, down the seven worlds all the way to Bur, the earth. And so everything is actually the light of Brahman. It's just being, as it hits different facets of the crystal, it turns into a different color, a series of colors, and those colors then become rainbow worlds, and those rainbow worlds then begin to reflect subtle worlds, and those subtle worlds then begin to manifest gross worlds. But it's all the light of Brahman. It's refracted in different ways. Now, that's a beautiful teaching, sort of like there's a story in the tradition called Indra's jeweled net. So Indra is the god of the world, so he's sitting inside of this jeweled net, and each facet of the net is a different look into a different world. And that's all Maya's net, you see. But Indra knows that it's Maya's net. So that's a beautiful teaching as related in the Itihasa of India. But what if Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva all of a sudden fulfilled themselves as the Trinity, and they wanted to merge in Brahman? How do they do it? They're going to have to develop some special power to turn around and look at that light, you see, because they have their cosmic ego, and their cosmic ego is responsible for billions and billions of souls in hundreds and thousands of worlds that they're residing over in the cosmic process. Brahman is standing free and clear of all that. The other end of the spectrum is earth, air, fire, water, and ether as solidified principles, and in between is all these worlds, and the Trinity is at the head of that, you see. So they're going to have to all of a sudden say, my life in the current of time is now over, and it's been a good run, these 320 million years, 4,320 million years, times 4, times 8, times 16, times 32. Manvantaras on top of Manvantaras, times 16, times 12. It's been a good run, you see. And I've had many days of Brahman and many nights of Brahma, but now I want to merge. So they're going to have to let go of their hold on this form, this causal form they have, and somehow turn around in their meditation and see this bliss of Brahman behind them, the light of consciousness. And then dissolve themselves into it. And when they do, another great soul will take their place for the next series of cycles. So that is another aspect of that teaching of this jeweled net, or of this many, many worlds that are being projected by the Trinity all the time. Now, it says here from the story of Shiksha that mind has inherent diseases. That's the first teaching that Shiksha would give to Ram. What's the origin of diseases? The origin of the diseases is mind. And he begins to tell Ram that actually then the first disease is rebirth. Primary disease of the mind. The first one would be rebirth. And why does rebirth happen? Because absence of discriminative wisdom. So this is the direct cause of Sara, the essential. So disease associated with rebirth has these three things to consider about it if you want to be free of rebirth and ignorance. First, you've come into the body devoid of your discriminative wisdom between the real and the unreal. When you got into the body and life and upbringing and parents and lifetimes and heavens, earths, and hells and so forth, you were supposed to bring your discriminative wisdom with you, see, not leave it behind. I used to say it's like a wizard, created a world with a magic wand, right? And he got so engrossed in it he wanted to get into it, even though it was his own creation. So he walked through the veil and into that world he created, but he left his wand behind. Big mistake. So now he's going through lifetimes of thinking that he's in a world that isn't of his own devising, when the whole thing was projected by him, and he has no way of getting out of it, because the very power called discriminative wisdom wand he left outside when he got into it. So he therefore leaves himself open to many lifetimes in ignorance and no way to get out. So there's one way of putting it. Philosophically speaking, though, what we need to think about in terms of Varuna's instruction to Bhrigu here is that mind is dual by nature. Dual means it has pleasure, pain, has virtue and vice in it, has good and bad, has heaven, earth, and hell. It's all its concomitants, you see. And remember, when we're saying that's by its very nature. You cannot change it. Therefore, you can't change the world. You can only transcend it. If you're trying to change the world, you're doing so out of ignorance. If you're trying to make a positive change, good for you. Then you're going to trade bad karma for good karma, you see. And good karma you may be able to use that as some sort of propulsion to have no karma. Krishna says so in the Gita. There's those three kinds of karma, bad, mixed, and good. But then he said there's also colorless karma. See, one's black, one's mixture of black and white, and good karma is white. But what about the colorless karma that Krishna has himself, you see? How did he get that? How does he stay free of the ignorance when he too is born into lifetimes as avatars, like in the case of Sri Ram, Krishna's earlier incarnation? So it begs the question then, what is this colorless karma? What is this action in inaction? It's going to have to include transcendence of mind. So when mind is there, then there's matter. So when there's no matter, never mind. You see. So mind is at the hub of everything that's projected. Its thought is at the head of everything. Everything is made out of thought, and thought requires intelligence. So everything you're handling, everything you're seeing, everything you're moving through is made out of your own intelligence. It's food. If you projected it, then you should consume it, see, and then get the nutrients out of it. Sri Ramakrishna used to say the great swan, drinks a bowl of cream, milk from the bowl and extracts the essence and leaves the water because of a special quality in its saliva. It can extract the cream from the 2%, as it were. See? So basically it is able to discriminate and take the essence and leave behind the non-essence out of everything it encounters. So this is the direct cause of rebirth and ignorance and all that, and disease. Any kind of disease you can think of, mental, physical, disease in the life force, the disease of rebirth is directly associated with your absence of discriminative wisdom. That original cosmic buddhi, which is a spark in you, which the Upanishad here is talking about as the highest imperium, the supreme bliss hidden in the cave of the intellect. So gives you a face on the target of Brahman, doesn't it? See, something to aim at. Because Brahman is a very wide and very subtle target. Now you have a point to aim at, and that point is inside yourself. Kingdom of heaven is within you. So, and that heaven happens to be capital H heaven. That is the ultimate supreme imperium, as they're saying here. Now, I'm just spending a lot of time on that because that's the direct cause. That's Sara. That's the essential cause of all problems. And including rebirth is just the absence of discriminative wisdom. So if you came here without it, but you believe it's somewhere inside you, then you have to retrieve it and put it first among all things and let everything else stack up behind it. Sri Ramakrishna said, if you have a line of zeros and you add them up, it's nothing. But if you have a 1 in front of the zeros, it becomes a huge number. So you could say that cosmic buddhi, or that cave of the intellect, is the most important thing that you could have in any world at any time, in any incarnation. And therefore, well, don't leave home without it. Don't separate yourself from Brahman without it. You may not even want to separate yourself from Brahman at all. Somehow beings can do that. They can come to the worlds, but they're not of the worlds, they're in the worlds. Now, second there you see want of mastery over the sense objects is the next thing Vishishta tells the young Ram. First, absence of discriminative wisdom. Now you have want of mastery over the sense objects. That is, it means you haven't gained mastery over the sense objects yet. You're still falling for them. And you've fallen for them so often for so many lifetimes, it has created a habit of falling for them. When again, the teaching is they've come out of you, and you've projected them, and then somehow you forgot you projected them, and you want them back, you see, or you want them. Actually, if you wanted them back, you'd have a key. Say, I think I'll just take them back and have them, see, because they came out of me. But you don't think that way, you see. You left your wand outside the cave, so all of a sudden you're thinking, look at that beautiful thing. I want that for the first time. See, doesn't make sense, you see. There is nothing new under the sun. Is that Ecclesiastes who said that? There is nothing new under the sun, you see. So everything has happened again and again and again, and you've projected again and again and again, and all these things have been apparently outside of you again and again and again. They've always come from within you again and again and again. Yet you still find yourself in that conundrum of wanting them. See, so then you have some of your important practices. You see, like we often sing. We had a lot of fun at the last summer retreat with our Bhaja Govindam. We took apart the whole Bhaja Govindam hymn and started singing. Pranayamam prachaharam nicha nicha viveka vicharam japya sameta samadhi vidanam purva vadanam mahadavadanam. Wait. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam mudamate samprapte sanihite kale nahi nahi raksha Shati Dukrin Kadene. Adam. Therefore, your name now is Abhinaya. Yes, we welcome our newest member to the Sangha. Happens to be my nephew, but more importantly, my new student, and initiated into the order of Sri Ramakrishna through SRV and received the name Abhinaya. And Antevasan is another word. So he's actually going to become a swift knower of Brahman through self-control. And so that's what I mean here. You practice that kind of discipline. It says pranayamam, do your pranayam. Pratyaharam, do your withdrawal of the senses from their objects. Right? So we're just talking about Nicha Viveka Vichara. What's Nicha Viveka? Famous Vedantic teaching.
Eternal.
Huh?
Eternal.
Nicha Viveka. The practice of discrimination between the real and the unreal. And vichara, inquiry into the true nature of the self. You see. So once you find out that there's a difference between the real and the unreal, then you have to ask, what is the real? You see. But you can't do that if the unreal is still standing in the way, in the form of sense objects that you're attached to, in the form of lack of discriminative wisdom. You see. All put nicely in a verse by these wonderful followers of Shankara. If you want that in actual English, it says, regulate the breath, withdraw the senses from their objects, discriminate well and constantly between the real and the unreal, controlling the mind and senses with the recitation of the mantra. Perform these well and with great care. So that's Antevasan right there. See, that's that name of that. Meaning of that word. Control the mind and the senses with the recitation of the mantra. So all of these are called sadhana, aspects or disciplines of sadhana. So you want that. You want to hone your discriminative wisdom once you get it back, and you want to always be master of the objects and master of the senses. Not let them each take their own road. You know, there's another verse about it actually. Recite the Gita, it says, which Abhinaya here has memorized, but basically it has to do with five senses are five white horses, and the chariot is the mind, and you should be at the controls with the reins called prana, you see. But instead you've let the reins go, and each horse, now each sense, seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, smelling, wants to take a different road. See, has nobody controlling it. So the mind comes to ruin, pulled apart on the road of life. So it's an ancient metaphor out of the Gita and other teachings too. And it's going to require then that you master the senses and their objects and get your discriminative wisdom intact. Finally, inability to stem desires and egotism in the mind. So it's all mind, mind, mind. See, and why you need to use mind to get to the cave of the intellect instead. Now, there is a secondary cause for disease called samanya, or ordinary. Those are diseases incidental to the body. The result of it is mental delusion leads to mental disease. Mental disease leads to negative thoughts. Negative thoughts lead to negative actions. And karmas come from those, and those karmas result in disease of the body. One of the ancient holistic healers, right? You've got two bookends here in Indian darshana that the world should take stock of. Earliest times, Lord Vashishta, holistic healer. Most recent times, Patanjali, father of yoga, holistic healer. They were many, many great seers in between that weren't teaching much about the body or the prana or any of that. They thought, oh, they have that already. They don't need these teachings. But these two bookends of Indian philosophy and darshana came to make sure that, all the minute details were in place. See, that you knew the connections between Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha, and could therefore find your way out of this house of magic that you had projected. This Maya, see, samsara, if you want to use that word. Not content just to tell Ram, because similar teachings happen between Krishna and Arjuna, but not content to tell him, Ram, that about just the primary and secondary causes of disease. He goes on down and connects them. There's a process of rising and falling of disease he should know about, he tells Ram. This is in the Yoga Vashishta. It's called Laghu Yoga Vashishta. It's the shortened version. There's a huge, voluminous Yoga Vashishta, but there's a more slimmed down version of it too. In fact, it might be Abhinaya who did that. There's a seer named Abhidaya who slimmed down I'll have to look it up, but there's one more recent seer that took the Bhrigu Yoga Vashishta and slimmed it down to the Laghu so that we could digest it in one lifetime. Anyway, whatever the case may be, you want to look into Yoga Vashishta for this story on Shikidwaja and follow it up and see exactly how, in the telling of the story, Ram's question about diseases came up and what Vashishta said to him. He went on saying, and this is a more probably very helpful to the psychotherapists, to the doctors, and those among us who are Vedantists who hold a vocation in the world and are trying to bring Vedantic light in through those vocations. This is very helpful. I know the healers are very interested in this, and our own Baba Ma down in San Francisco, who's an excellent healer on many levels, has written this down and used it in her healing modalities to help people and to understand how people, not only individuals but collective mind, is succumbing to these diseases and how to heal them. Mental agitation weakens the nervous system, he tells Ram first. What does that tell you? The same thing that I told a 29-year-old woman here 2 days ago. Brooding is the worst waste of time you can engage in. That's been one of the best lines I've ever come up with to help people. Just directly and quickly says, it's like giving them permission not to brood. Because brooding is such a habit, it's so easy to do. True, there is a kind of brooding that's more positive. Mother hen sits on her egg and broods. A couple years ago, outside my house, a turkey nested in a tree right next to our house. A big turkey. It sat there for like 2 weeks. Every time I came by, I looked at it. I was wondering if it was alive. When I came too near, it was like getting nervous, getting agitated. So it sat there for 2 weeks, and finally one day it had left, and there was two or three big eggs there, you see. So it was brooding, on its brood. Brooding on its brood. So there is a positive kind of brooding that humans can do too. It's just called thinking it out. It's kind of a contemplation kind of thing, you see. But what we're talking about here, brooding as a habit, is a negative preoccupation. So sometimes you can just tell people that. They say, I have a problem with depression and brooding. Why? You're a noble soul. There's no reason. It's your mind. You don't have to let your mind brood. What's that about? Put it on something positive. See, do some work. Serve others. There's all sorts of ways out of that problem. So whatever the case may be, when it develops a habit of brooding, that's mental agitation, and it doesn't know it, but it's affecting its prana, you see. We're talking from the inside out here now. Many people do negative action. That interrupts their prana can't flow to the mind, and then their mind broods. But if you're looking at it in this way, it's really everything starting from mind out, right? You're asking the question, what's the origin of disease, and how does it get perpetuated? You're not saying, how did I get sick here from eating unwholesome food, and then the sickness worked in. You see, that's the Mayak way. That's the backwards way. We complain about that many times and say, medicine is only treating the effect and not the cause, or surgery is too invasive, or this and that. Sitting on a couch talking to a therapist is not getting to the root of the matter. We complain about those things all the time, but we never think in terms of the origin and perpetuation of a thing. For instance, in philosophy, you'd cut to the chase. You just say, first consciousness, then mind, then matter. Matter over, you see. The whole problem is if you understand that right, is gone. And you're no more a material girl in a material world, or just wanting to have fun, you see. You have a human body and you're doing something about it. That is, either putting it to an end so that you can return to your true self, or learning how to live a dharmic life and help others, as we say. Those are just two very good options in that case. But first you're going to have to think in the proper order, from inside out. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachyate.
Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate.
So everything that's inside is infinite. The external, although it appears finite, is also infinite. From the infinite the finite has come. Yet being infinite, only infinite remains. So you have to think in terms of the origin of a thing, as far as an origin can take you. Now, religiously speaking, Christ didn't want his religion based on origins. That should have been specified by the Church Fathers, that beyond origins is the Word, in the beginning, you see. And actually, if you say in the beginning, it sounds like the Word is an origin. But the Tantras say the Word is sounding itself all the time, spontaneously, and nobody can stop it from sounding. It's like this eternal sounding board out of which all vibrations come. It's the divine violin, as it were, just emitting vibrations on all levels all the time. But that's only when it's with God. In the beginning was the Word and it was with God. But when it was God, the two have become one. There's no origin to that. So you can't find an origin. And so if you start thinking in terms of beginning, middles, and endings, then you're going to think in terms of birth, life, and death. Those are beginnings, middles, and endings. And you fall into the misassumption that the soul that's eternal and infinite that somehow can get born, or it can get created, or it came from dust, or other such metaphoric sayings. Those are become superstition now. Yourself is eternal and it always will be eternal, never was anything but eternal, and it's pure and perfect. And if you say that to someone with authority, they'll quit brooding and they'll start thinking. See, chitta loshana, and then you move on to chittabhati, or chittabhati, and then that's the light of thinking, and then chitta lochana, actually seeing. You see, so it's chitta, it's the mind that's seeing. These eyes only see very limited things. The mind sees, can see both ways, inside and out, right? It uses the senses out, but when it begins to look inside and see inside, that's when it all gets very good, you see. But if there's disease in the way, it's not going to happen. So quit brooding. I just spent 10 minutes telling you all of that, just to say, stop the mind's penchant for brooding. And eventually then you'll be able to say, like Ram, right? Like they sing to Ram in some of the beautiful songs to him, you see. Not going to be able to put my eyes on the table of contents, but he says, basically, "O Lord, here's my prayer to thee. Kindly put an end to my mind's tendency to see duality." That's his prayer to God. Now, you have to think very deeply to have that kind of a prayer ready when God appeared to you all of a sudden and say, "What do you want, kid?" Fame, wealth, what would go through your mind? But that's not what the devotee of Ram said when he appeared to him. He said, "Kindly cause my mind to quit perceiving duality, for only Atman exists, nothing else exists." It is brooding on sense objects and so forth that causes me to forget my true nature. So he knows the routine of Maya, mind in Maya. He wants to reverse that tendency and make sure he doesn't fall into disease again. So you don't know that your mind is affecting your prana. You're thinking maybe the prana is affecting the mind, so you're trying to eat good food and so forth. But that's what's called an indirect cause of physical disease. We've been taught differently in the West. You could run outside in the winter with almost nothing on and never catch a cold if the cold wasn't in you to begin with. You see. I used to do it here in Portland, run around wet as a young boy, go out and deliver papers over there in southwest Portland when I was 10 in the snow and the ice with almost nothing on, just a sweater, you see. My own body heat keeping me warm. Swami Vedananda walked in the Himalayas barefoot in the winter and meditated up there, you see. Such was his transcendence of heat and cold. And he never got sick. So you go, put a coat on and you'll get sick. Well, you plant that idea in a kid's mind, they probably will. See? You're the noble Atman, you can't get sick. Only your body can get sick. And actually, if your soul is realized and your mind is strong, then you can resist those illnesses too. So, mental agitation weakens the nervous system. Then prana gets arrested and fails to pervade the body. How many pranas did we look at yesterday? High five, all right? So the all-pervading prana gets arrested. You see, it's like it's always there, it's always healthy. It's like your health is there all the time in the form of prana. But all of a sudden it gets blotted out in certain areas. See, there are prana gruntis, there are blocks in it. And all of a sudden you start to feel weak and you start to feel like you're dying. You start to feel like your energy's fading and you can't keep your concentration up and so forth. You fall asleep. Various things are happening to you because of this arrested prana. Then the prana begins to vibrate at an unequal rate. It reminds me of, I saw it again, one of the big problems for America right now is diesel trucks, you see, on these roads. So many of them. And they're getting longer and longer. Every time I take a drive, which is 4 times a year on the mainland when I come from Hawaii, you see these diesel trucks. And if they encounter just the slightest shimmer on a soft shoulder, they start to vibrate like this. And that vibrate grows bigger and bigger and bigger and affects the whole thing, and then ka-wham, they're on their sides. And people get killed and roads get blocked. It's horrible. And besides the things are polluting all the time, the drivers are not aware, you see, and they're driving these these calamities waiting to happen. Anyway, that's that part of it. But the other part of it is just what a nice metaphor that is. If the system gets a little bit imbalanced, just a little bit, then that thing starts to reverberate, you see, in causes and effects, and the whole thing can fall over. And that's sort of what Vashishtha is talking about here. Nerves quiver, causing the body to weaken then. Breathing becomes uneven and body begins to shake. Angame Jayatva and Shvasa Prashvasa are 4 of the problems Patanjali says in yoga. One is restlessness of limbs. You don't know where to put your legs, your arms, how to hold your head, shoulders. See, it's all anga, limb, me jayatva. You haven't got victory over your limbs. And then the breathing is uneven. Shvasa prashvasa. Your breathing is, maybe you're taking, I saw it just the other day, too many in-breaths. And you don't ever see them breathe out. See, athletes do that. You get energy from prana by breathing in, but you have to even it out and then breathe out, you see. And you can't just go, and if you're going all the time, you're headed for death, because that's the last thing you'll do is breathe out in this lifetime. Besides, that's what they call a sigh, right? Sigh of relief, right? So why are you relieved? You believed in something that wasn't true in the first place, and then you got relieved when it didn't happen, see? So just breathe naturally, not like panting like a dog. You just breathe in, breathe out, and if you're not, then practice it. Pranayamam pratyaharam nicha nicha viveka vicharam Bhaja Govinda. It all leads to love of the Lord, and you can't have that love of the Lord if you're a pathetic specimen. See? The Lord's going to look at you. See, somebody took initiation last night, right? And as a joke, one of my other students said, "Oh, good, you're initiated. I can associate with you now." See, because unless you're initiated, the lovers of God don't want you around. It's not just them that don't want us around. We don't want them around either. See, they're impure. They're still serving the ego, but we've given our ego over to the divine being. So, Sri Ramakrishna said it nicely. Cows drive horses away from the herd. So you have to get your initiation and get pure. That's why the first thing that all the seers do, even if they're perfect, they get a teacher and get initiated in this world, so that they'll be accepted across the board in holy company, wherever they go. You go anywhere and you don't have a path and you don't have a teacher and you don't have a reason for being there, they look at you strangely, you see. What's suspicious, you see. We call them ghosts and phantoms here, you see. They come amongst us, you say, "Oh, I'm really into this," and 2 weeks later they're gone. See? Like they were non-beings in the first place. So anyway, this breathing becomes uneven and the body begins to shake, you see. I mean, what is Alzheimer's and what is all these diseases that are coming upon us if it isn't just lack of discriminative wisdom, want of mastery of the senses, and too many desires? You think half of those diseases would not be here, and all the medicines that they're putting out to so-called cure them would not be necessary if you followed this regimen? So, instead of inventing new diseases to scare us, let's get the ultimate cure. It's called yoga. And I'm not talking about hatha, people. It doesn't going to cure anything but a few little blocks in your body, in your physical nerves. But we're talking about nadis, subtle nerves that go into your dream state, that go into your deep sleep state, that when you run your consciousness along them, consciously turn you into a realized soul. A master of the three worlds, A-U-M, a knower of Om, and a swift knower, Antevasan, of Brahman. Well, when the body begins to shake, what's going to happen? Then you ingest food, and in this state, that food turns poisonous. Too late for good food of any kind to be of any help. See? Well, let's feed him chicken broth. See? Why isn't he getting better? See? Because he's still brooding. He's thinking, I'm sick, I'm going to die. And nobody's there to tell him, you're the Atman. The Atman doesn't get sick and it can't die. You've seen people come out of illnesses. Why? Because they had a turn of mind. And people will die, the healers tell me, if they don't want to live. No medicine or machine or hospital or family can keep them alive if they want to go. See? They've given up. For whatever reason, either out of being through with the mess, world weariness, or because they know they have to take a new body and this one is not adequate to the task. So let's run at them with good food. Well, no, actually, let's feed them Jell-O. You see, that'll cure them. And iceberg lettuce that's brown around the edges. See? How about some hot dogs or something? See, whatever the hospital has, let's feed that to them, and that'll make them better. Right. But the whole thing is so Mayic. It's not bad food that made them sick, and it's not bad food that will make them better, or good food that will make them better. This will make them better. Getting your discriminative wisdom back, turning your mind positive, and it all starts with the mind, so you better go to the mind and work on it. Make it non-dual. Oh Lord, please remove my tendency to perceive duality. Make my mind's eye single, so I can know the truth. It doesn't matter after that what the body does. No food or drink can taint the self, the noble self that knows itself. Thus, like a rolling river free thou ever be, see, Vivekananda said. Now, food ingested in this state turns poisonous. Then energy from food is stymied and disease sets in. This is how the seer, Lord Vashishta, relates it to Ram, not just to tell him about the essentials, but to actually give him the dynamics, step-by-step process of how it all works, so that he can meditate on it and stymie it, stop it, see, before it sets in. Right now, Ram is brooding on the suffering of the world. That's not good. The world's unreal. Suffering's unreal. Ignorance is unreal. So he's got this one little tendril of Maya in him as a teenager, that he thinks that, number one, he can help the world, which is wrong, because the world cannot be helped. And number two, he thinks he can be the helper, see. But with that little bit of Maya in his mind, he can't help anyone. So Vashishta has to remove that. That's the beautiful thing about that. The most beautiful thing about that scripture is the way Vashishta deftly removes that little trace of Maya in the young avatar's mind, so that he will be transcendent of the whole shooting match, and in that way be the best ideal to how to transcend the problems of the world. Because the problems of the world will never go away. Why? The world came out of the mind, and the diseases are inherent in that mind. So you transcend it. Anyone isn't clear about that right now, come to see me at the break. I mean, getting over your brooding, that's one thing. Most of you have probably done that, negative brooding. But to understand this subtle truth is to go against the grain the rest of the way the world's thinking. 95% of the world, at least, is based on evolution, see. And with a sort of unhealthy admixture of theirs that God is our creator. But God is not our creator. The mind is our projector. A good bumper sticker, you see, or a t-shirt. God is not a creator. The mind is a projector. I mean, it puts the whole thing in perspective for you. And then you can start thinking about what God really is. Transcendent, eternal, formless, diseaseless, free of brooding, free of health and disease both. Well, I think we're at a time, we'll come back and begin here with the indirect causes, just as Amir mentioned after our break. And remember now, we are stopping a bit here because we took so much of a bite yesterday. We took about 6 lessons of chapter 3, and there were 10 lessons in it. So we took a huge hunk out of that, looked at the 5 sheaths, and now we're bringing out charts that go with each of those 5 sheaths to help explain in a deeper way connections between body, prana, mind, intellect, and ego. A wonderful system called Adara, which is one of Vedanta's 101 teachings for the world. So here, we'll have our break, and we will go with healthy minds and bodies to take some pure prasad in our Brahman kitchen. We'll see you in about 15 minutes. We welcome you back to the second half of this class in the Taittiriya Upanishad, where we've been taking apart the Adara system for the last two classes. That is 3 hours yesterday and an hour and a half today. And in the final hour today, and don't forget we continued on next weekend at the same time on Saturday and Sunday, probably be finishing up the Taittiriya Upanishad fairly soon. In that case, then, we want to finish up this chart we were talking about in regards to the Pranamaya Kosha. You remember that the great and august Lord Vashishta is teaching the young avatar Sri Ram about the origin of disease and its perpetuation. There's also a chart called the destruction of disease, but we might be able to take that up next week. As far as the indirect causes of disease, because we've looked at the essential, Sara, and the Samanya, the ordinary not still being applicable to the idea that the mind is the source of all diseases and not otherwise. You purify the mind and then the body is much less prone to disease, and what disease it does get goes away quite swiftly because the mind is not thinking of its disease, it's thinking of its Atman, or at its origin. So origins inside of origins until one finds the originless Brahman is kind of the idea in Vedanta. Now, indirect causes of physical disease we know about: eating unwholesome food, living in unhealthy conditions, performing actions at inauspicious times, evil desires and bad thoughts. That has to do with, of course, the mental agitation that comes from them. Inflicting injuries on others, association with evil beings, longing for improper attainments. That would be a kind of desire, ongoing desire. Then distension and contraction of the orifices of the nerves of the joints. It gets right on down into the physical part of it, and how these indirect causes, unwholesome food, unhealthy conditions, desires, and so forth, can get right into the very body and cause that kind of problem. And finally, of course, subjection to the 5 elements, which I was talking about when we learned we shouldn't go out in the cold without a coat on and so forth. It was probably true of our case at that time because we didn't have this kind of wisdom, but once one is imbued with this kind of wisdom that all diseases are in the mind and that all the vagaries and vicissitudes of life can be overcome by a positive mental stance, then we become very masterful at those mental stances. For instance, if the whole society is suffering from emotionalism, but you're taking the stance of akshobha, means akshobhasana. I'm the stance of being non-emotional. So you immediately lift yourself out of that flow of souls that are caught and lost in emotional problems. As we know, that's a main problem today, and especially in the Western society. Of course, the causes for that you'd look deeper for, but nonetheless, when it's upon you, it would behoove the wise aspirant who's seeking these higher means and ways to practice a mental asana like that. That's called a salubrious position, and that is a healthful position. But there are asanas which are higher than that, which are called actually spiritual asanas, and then even sempiternal ones, like the self is Brahman. I am Atma Brahmasana. You take the stance that the self is Brahman, and never was anything else but Brahman all the time, no matter what the appearances of Maya and the opinions of society might say otherwise. So the origin of all disease begins in the mind. That's kind of been the answer to the question, what is the origin of disease? So we've taken up this chart that is an explication of the teaching of Lord Vashishta to Sri Ram in Yoga Vashishta scripture. And you may look that up. We even have a translation of Yoga Vashishta that I've done here in the SRV ashram that can be taken from the library or ordered over online. And you can look up these stories yourself and get these great teachings from them. The benefits from taking them from a teacher, a Dharma teacher, is that I will put them in such a way that you may read them on the pages, but I may concentrate them into certain methods and orders that you can take in almost at one glance. These are some 240 now charts that I've created, I call them, or sort of storyboard kind of thing that you can. They're beginning to appear in our books and in our Nectar of Non-Dual Truth magazine, SRV, and we will have a book called Footfalls of the Ancient Rishis, the Indian Rishis, that's coming out, that'll have most all of the charts in them, and it may have to be 2 volumes. We're beginning to think about that as it grows, but it's about 2/3 of the way completed, and it has commentaries on each of these charts from these various darshanas of India. Now, we should go on, after having looked at the Pranamaya Kosha, we can look at a bit at the Manomaya Kosha and the Vijnanamaya Kosha. We can really take them in one fell swoop with this chart on a teaching of these 2 special yogas that Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi, Sri Ramakrishna's divine consort and wife, gave us when she was alive. This will be in conjunction with these lesson 4 and 5, where he said, he understood that Manas was Brahman. Certainly all beings here indeed are born of the mind, Manas. Having been born, they remain alive in the mind, and departing, they enter back into the mind. That's specifically pertinent to souls who are Manushyatvam is the word in Sanskrit. It's a human birth, but there's no mention of a body in that. It's Manus. It's the mind that's being born, not bodies. Bodies are offshoots of minds. Minds took their birth from sankalpa, from ego. So it's the mind that's actually being born, and then its extension is the body. So this is even further proof, if any is needed, or verification for you that you're not the body. Now you're trying to sort of learn you're not the mind, too. You're not the mind that can produce many, many bodies over many, many aeons and so forth, but that you can shut off the production process, shut down the production line, and quit manufacturing bodies, especially bodies in ignorance. The avatars are producing bodies in full consciousness to help others, but they come here to help you how? To be happy in the world? It doesn't sound like it when Lord Buddha is teaching you that there is suffering here, First Noble Truth. And when Sri Ram is finding out that there's suffering everywhere outside the Koshala Palace, and it was the case with Lord Buddha too, when he left the Sakya clan and went out as a mendicant. So they wouldn't come back to teach you how to be happy in the world. Dharmic maybe, or content maybe, but their main teaching is to get you up and out of the rebirth and ignorance. And rebirth is the first disease. You see, can't be put any clearer than that. You're not going to find this teaching in any other religion but in India. Not there. We're not talking about, rebirth in the first place. What to speak of rebirth as being a problem. Life as being limited. Sheaths as being limitations. 6 fetters, 8 fetters, 6 passions, 5 kleshas, 9 antaryayas, as being playmates at recess, see, that you don't want around, but there they are insinuating themselves upon you in the first place. So it's Indian darshana that's that way. And so Buddhism is included in Indian darshana, by the way. So sometimes accused of being pessimistic, but I'd say realistic. And once it is accepted as being realistic, then it can be optimistic. So you can't be optimistic about the world in its present condition, or in any condition you've ever seen it in history, for as far back as you can think. Nor can you think about a purely optimistic future when all diseases are in the mind. When we say all diseases in the mind, we don't just mean physical diseases, We talk about mental diseases too, and problems like retardation and mentally challenged people and cocaine babies and everything you can possibly think of that is a manifestation of some kind of disease. It's all from the mind. So we want to get back to that mind. And the 60s are telling us, oh, we got to get back to nature. Got to get back to the garden, you see. But that garden came out of an interior garden that you don't know much about yet, because you haven't awakened your prana and flowed along it into the regions of the mind. The minds are the kingdoms of heaven within. Not out there. Those are planets that don't support life. But life is teeming in the mind. Many, many lokas and akashas and realms and worlds are there inside, and you give up your physical body and you just become a tiny little subtle body that doesn't take up any space, any depth, any breadth, any height, any mass. You're a thought body, and you journey inside without taking up any space, and find your way back to your source. See, just like a trout going up a river, or salmon going up a river, you see, has to find its way back. Very small, infinitesimal part. So, isolation from nature, kaivalya, is one of the key teachings of yoga. You're going to want to divorce yourself from the form-producing machine in order to know yourself to be formless. And that's going to be without a doubt, and it's going to be with a certainty that that's the case. And then you can consider manufacturing bodies, not otherwise. So he talks about manas, and we might as well take it in at the same time. That is, lesson 5 goes on to say, then he understood that vijnana is Brahman, intellect or intelligence. For certainly all beings here born of vijnana, having been born, they remain alive by vijnana. They enter into vijnana at the end. Reflecting on the true nature of vijnana, then he approached his father and he taught him about Ananda, Maya Kosha, the ego. So he's learning step by step, as we said, about all his inner being, his non-self, as Shankara would call it later, in 700 AD. This taking place several thousand years prior to Christ. So I thought I would show you this chart quickly about Manomaya Kosha and Vijnanamaya Kosha, but not so much as its constituents, because we already looked at that, but as a way Holy Mother would treat the mind and intellect in 2 yogas. One's called Manobuddhi, which is mind-intellect complex, and the other's called Gyanodaya, intellect-compassion complex. So these are 2 yogas that can be attributed to her. One of them's even mentioned in the Gita. Toward the end of the Gita, Krishna talks about the Chaturjasya Yoga, the 4 yogas, and one of those is the yoga of the intellect. So these bullet points will be very elucidating if you listen to them. You find out here that she says, where is there any good in doing works and practices without collectiveness of mind? So scatteredness of mind, you do anything in that, you get scattered karma. But if you can collect the mind and do your work with a one-pointed way, then you will avoid that. Because she said there's no good in doing works without collectedness of mind. Grace descends only after concentration of mind. So you have all these people suffering and unhappy and restless and full of desires. Oh, give me your grace, give me your grace. and the Lord looks at a round hole, a round hole in a square peg, and says, well, I can't. It's not going to fit. Even if I gave it to you, you wouldn't know what to do with it. So she says, grace only descends with collectedness of mind. So your business is to make your mind peaceful. She says, peace is, first and foremost, you must have peace, she says. Even your work and service demands this. Nice, she puts those 2 together. Therefore, you should know that it is improper to deprive living beings of what is their due. In this regard, compassion is knowledge. So she puts together 2 yogas, or 2 aspects of life that quite often aren't looked at that way. When you think of compassion, you think of devotion, right? You think of the path of bhakti. But she's saying, actually, the highest knowledge is compassion. That is, knowledge is really true knowledge when you give it to people. That's the best compassion. And guess who concurs with that 100%?
Buddha.
Buddha.
Vivekananda.
Well, yes, but I'm thinking of actually specifically said in the Gita, you see, Sri Krishna says, the highest of all sacrifices is the knowledge sacrifice. Those who give this knowledge to others, I consider them to be my dearest children. So giving out of knowledge will remove ignorance, that will free people. And that happens swiftly. One lifetime can happen. Swiftly means one lifetime. So Holy Mother, Sri Krishna, Lord Buddha, you said, these are really exponents of a kind of middle way. See, it's not absolute monasticism necessarily, that Krishna and Holy Mother weren't really monks, you see, or nuns. They had a focus elsewhere. So they were giving these teachings up the middle for most of the people of the world. And so they're saying, if you can get this knowledge and give it, it will be compassion. So let's look at that yoga first. Compassion for all who fear death by teaching them Atmagyan. Atmagyan, knowledge of your true nature, which is birthless and deathless, right? So what more compassionate thing could you do for someone who fears death than to tell him, your soul is birthless and deathless. Your body passes. Actually, even bodies remain in our memories. Faces, right? Ancestors, they're called. So the mind can produce those beings again. Krishna's body comes back. He looks pretty much the same as Ram. You see, Holy Mother comes back. She looks pretty much the same as Mother Mary and Maitreyi and others. So you see these characteristics of divinities cling to them, cling to their features. And you'll always recognize them. So actually even the body doesn't die. See? Comes from the elements, returns to the elements, gets reformed out of the elements, but there's another power there that's doing the reforming, you see, that's doing the recalling. I see. So that's compassion. You find people with fear about death, just tell them, what are you talking about? So I told the young lady the other night, you have a problem with brooding, just don't brood. It's the worst waste of time. She started weeping. Nobody ever told her that before. See? Not with any authority. I said, why are you depressed? I said, oh soul, grieve no more. Celebrate your eternal birthless, deathless nature. That's right out of the Ashtavakra Samhita. Oh soul, why do you grieve? Your true nature is such and such that goes on telling you this with no commentary, without any explication whatsoever, just the straight statements of who you are. So here, I could be telling you that and we'd have the class over in a couple minutes, but we're still working on what you're not and getting that real clear at every level: body, energy, mind, intelligence, and ego. At every level, see. So there will be no doubt left in you in this lifetime as to the true nature of reality, see. Om Drishyam Pratitam Pravilapayan San, as we chant, you see. This true nature which you always are and always have been. Compassion for one's own mind by destroying distraction. Take compassion on yourself, you see. Brooding is one thing, but this constant distraction away from the point has been going on for lifetimes, and you're allowing it. See? You're allowing Maya to cover yourself. You're allowing other beings to distract you away from the point of existence, the goal of human existence. See? Well, don't allow it anymore. Have compassion for yourself. Serve all beings with works offered after gaining knowledge. Krishna's teaching again, like Holy Mother's, right? Middle path kind of teaching. You don't do work and try and serve before you're perfected yourself. At least to some degree. It might be a little bit impractical to think, well, I have to be perfect before I do anything for anyone else. See? But just know that when you do anything for anyone else, when you're imperfect, the results are going to be imperfect. Like you feed a starving person, they're going to be starving next week too. Alleviate their hunger for a few days, you see. But if you can come up to them and say, you're not the food sheath, See, you're not the pranic sheath, and give them out some higher wisdom, then their mind stops thinking about food and hunger and starvation and the future, and starts thinking in terms of here and now, who I am, and so forth. And then it's just like around the sun there's no darkness. You see, the darkness just melts away, and all of a sudden everything comes to them. See, that's the highest wisdom. I mean, you can affect it in a thrice if you have realized it yourself. So, serve all beings with works after you gain knowledge. Study the scripture to gain freedom, and serve God and mankind. Atmano moksharta jagaditaya cha. That's how Swamiji put it as the motto of the Ramakrishna order. Realization of the self, and then the service of God and mankind. See, Atmano moksharta, get your Atman free. Realize the freedom of your Atman. Atmano moksha. See? Then, jagaditaya cha. The world then can come after. So you always work to perfect yourself first. She's saying this is the true compassion, the true knowledge. Then you can study the scriptures and give that wisdom out without any doubt. See, if somebody comes up to you and says, and you're a farmer and says, I want to find a teacher of the Gita. And you say, well, I can teach the Gita. And they say, well, what do you do for a living? I farm. And they come back the next day and say, I think I want to learn the Gita from you. I might end up with plowshares and cows and fields to work on. See? So you're coming to take the teachings from me, and I was a musician. So if you start playing music or thinking music, then you'll know that you've got a transmission mixed in there. You see? So you want to go to someone who knows the Gita, don't you? Not someone who sometimes Gita, sometimes farming. See? So this is why you need to keep the whole thing pure. Study the scriptures after gaining freedom, and serve God and mankind. Seek to utilize wisdom for service, not for selfish purposes. That should be obvious. Do your work knowing that Brahman is not a form, but is formless. Another way of putting service of God and mankind. You're not serving the personality, you're serving Brahman. God is not a personality, it's a principle. And that principle exists equally in all beings. So you're not serving the personality, you're serving the supreme being that exists equally in all beings. Does it need your service? Not really. That's the conundrum of the thing. God doesn't need your service, but you need it, and you need to do it in the right way in order to perfect yourself. So knowledge first, then action. It's kind of the message here. Keep holy company to refine the self in order to serve better. So if you're around holy company, you'll know what to do and what not to do. You won't develop any bad habits or complacencies. Some aspects of the Jnanodaya Yoga, which applies more to this mind-intellect sheath. Now let's look at Mano Buddhi Yoga. Complete concentration of mind on the chosen ideal. So you have your Manomaya Kosha there, you see, and it's dual by nature and has things in it that are an admixture of positive and negative and so forth. So why don't you use your Manomaya Kosha, to focus upon the highest ideal, the highest form. It loves forms. See, the mind loves forms. That's what it's engaged in. So, new lamps for old. Put a new lamp in the place of the old lamp. See, generate a new habit of samadhi, of bhava samadhi, and look upon Krishna or Ram as your beloved, or Buddha or Christ, or Ramakrishna or Swamiji and so forth. Put them in the place there, and concentrate the mind on the chosen ideal. That's called an ishtam. Contemplating the chosen ideal as the one and only reality. So make your mind single and sharpen the air of your mind with thoughts of God alone, and then aim it at Brahman. You get to the Father through the Son. So you're going to want to put all of your attention on the sun. Vaishnavas have a teaching, remember, Samipya, Salokya, Sarupya, and Sayujya. Samipya means you're dear to God, and Sarupya means you have the same form as God. Salokya means you live in the same realm as God, and Sayujya means you're free like God. So what comes to mind here as God being the one and only reality is that they say Samipya is like being the son of a king. You won't want for anything if you're the son of a king. So you consider that Lord of your heart, the King of the universes, the Lord of all the worlds, you see. Murta Maheshwaram. You see, we sing that sometimes. In fact, we should sing it a little bit, just to illustrate the beauty of that kind of Ishtam. In this case, would be the Ishtam of Swami Vivekananda and what he's brought to us, and how important what he has brought is to us. There it is. And we sing in that regard about the Ishtam. Murta means the form of the Lord, Murta Maheshwaram. Murta Maheshwaram Ujala Bhaskaram Ishvaramaya Madhavanjam. Murta Maheshwaram Ujala Bhaskaram Ishtaya Maranaravanjam. Vande Veda Tanu Mujita Garhita Kanchana Kamini Bandam. Murta Maheshwaram Ujala Bhaskaram Ishtaya Maranaravanjam. So, we offer salutations to Swami Vivekananda, who is the Shiva incarnate, Maheshwaram, and the radiant Son of Knowledge, reverently adored by celestial and earthly beings, as he presides over all these inner realms, you see, from the Brahmaloka on down, Sri Ramakrishna said. So, this is written by Chandra Chakravarti, one of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples who loved Swamiji very much, and amongst many other millions now that do. So, Murta Maheshwaram. So the idea being, take in this ideal and make it one and only ideal, and have it consume everything else, Vivekananda said. Like a tidal wave takes other waves into it as it mounts, you see. Have that, your devotion for that one ideal, consume everything around you, all other forms, all other waves, and make it the focal point of your meditation, your concentration, and your whole life. Now she wants you to scrutinize the ego to perceive the fallacy of ownership and agency. So you're looking at very positive things like the Ishtam within you, but you're also looking for these inconsistencies that you want to remove. Like the potter has clay, makes a pot, fires it, and it breaks in the kiln, you see. So he looks back at his clay, which is the source of the pot, and he finds all these little grains of sand in it. So he spends days taking out every little grain of sand. See? And then he makes a pot, fires it in the kiln, and it's perfect. So those grains of sand in your mind, the clay of your consciousness, might have things like ownership and agency in it. You see, this is mine, I, me, mine, all that kind of thing, you see. And I do, and I'm going to do. But those things you want to remove from the ego-mind complex. And so that's a part of your Mano Buddhi Yoga sadhana. analyzation of the personal karma to attenuate and alleviate it. As I said, if you begin to meditate on certain things, you'll begin to reveal the underlying elements in them. Their motivating principles, what they exist on. And if there's something that's existing that you don't want to exist, you remove those elements and it falls apart, it falls down, and there's no more a problem to you. So you need to be able to get at those unwanted karmas that are belying you and are standing in the way of your path to full realization. That full realization is knowledge of the full identity of the self with Brahman. The jiva is Shiva. Swami Sheshananda used to say from the podium quite often here in Portland when I was attending upon him. Jiva is Shiva, he would say. Jivatman and Paramatman are one and the same. The only difference is between these density of these sheaths, you see, and the appearance and presentation of them in front of your mind's eye, your consciousness. You can see through those, make your eye single and see through those. So if you have to become very, 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 very small and slip through the chinks in the net of Maya, you do that. And that way you can have full identity of the self with Brahman. Selfless performance of japa for the benefit of mankind, to her, is a part of Mano Buddha Yoga. So here the importance of mantra comes back and the recitation of it. In order to get at those consistencies in the mind, mantras like little scrubbing bubbles that get down there real deep. Thanks to everyone who came to the ashram last week and did some seva here and scoured the floors and the walls and got rid of layers of dirt that have accumulated, you see. Sort of like that, the mantra does that, you see. Start applying it to the mind, it starts to scour deeper and deeper and get rid of lifetimes of surface dirt. So pretty soon the original gold of consciousness begins to appear and shine, you see, as the mantra does its work. You have to persevere. The mantra will call up impurities in you and you'll see them. You should know that after you take initiation and after you've received the mantra, that if things start going wrong, you see, that's the work of the mantra. But that these so-called wrong appearances or unpleasurable and maybe cause a little bit of discomfort, but this is like the spool winding off the thread in the opposite direction, Holy Mother says. You wind on the thread and that's enjoyable, and maybe some pain too goes by, but then when you wind it off, you're going to feel pain and pleasure from other acts and other lifetimes come off in reverse fashion. So you'll feel it in reverse, but it's not as uncomfortable as when you actually went through the experience of pain. It's just a burnt thread or a burnt rope, as Ram Krishna said. Can't really bind you, but it has to go past your mind. It has to make its reverse appearance. So in that way, Holy Mother explains this process of japa. We also talked about it a little bit yesterday as being a universal practice and a practice that proceeds by repetition, and how it's in every religion, this speaking of the Lord's names and taking that power of the Lord's name deep inside. Recite the name of the Lord's and His glories unceasingly, so that the mirror of the mind will be wiped clean and quenched this mighty forest fire rising. You see. So Chaitanya had a beautiful poem about that. The name of the Lord and its effectiveness. Now the final bullet point, overcoming all obstacles via reliance on Mano Yoga and grace. I didn't have enough room to explain that in such a small space on an 8x11, but she was famous for that, teaching that God's grace, and self-effort are one and the same. Sri Ramakrishna had told her, the wind of God's grace is always blowing, but you have to raise your sail to catch it, right? Or put your kite up, you see. Sri Ramakrishna often says, it's not windy down here right now, I can't see any leaves blowing out there, you see. But if you go up about 500,000 feet, you'll feel the air currents above the earth. So the wind of God's grace is always blowing, but you have to make an effort to find it. And so in this way, she would say, grace is always yours, but until you purify the mind, you won't know it. So you have to do that mano buddhi yoga practices, mantra and so forth, and persevere in them until God's grace begins to show itself to you, probably by degrees. Enlightenment isn't like striking a match in a dark room. You see, and all of a sudden everything's lit up. See, that's usually comes in stages, by insights. See, and then goes away, and then comes in a better way, and so forth. At the right timing, we call auspicious timing. So here's a quote from Krishna at the end of this chart that says, mentally resigning all deeds unto me, having me as your highest goal, and resorting to the practice of buddhi yoga, fully fix your mind upon me. So that's in that Chaturdasha Yoga section toward the end of the Gita, where he brings out the 4 yogas, but one of them he's calling buddhi yoga. So that's the yoga of the intellect. And it doesn't go very well with our sloka here that we're talking about. You see, this same knowledge that Bhrigu was given by Varuna is founded on the highest imperium, the supreme bliss hidden in the cave of the intellect. They have the word intellect capitalized there, so it's more like a cosmic buddhi, very much in kin or in alignment with this highest ideal, the chosen ideal called the Ishtam. So I also wanted to specify a little bit more the Vijnanamaya Kosha by telling you or recalling to you this teaching of the pratibha. See, that also illustrates very nicely the Vijnanamaya Kosha. Everything, the world, manifestations therein, enjoying, suffering, departing, the power of conjuring the realms of name and form, can and should be directly designated and attributed to one's own intelligence. Other factors such as fate, destiny, karma, and even grace also reside within and spring from that self-same power. So it's definitely, this book is full of knowledge, right? But book knowledge and everything came from me as a thought. See, none of it would be there if it didn't start out inside as intelligence. Intelligence produced this. Now, if you're looking from the outside in, Maya produced it. See, it's all Maya, right? But what if you were to look from the inside out and you see that all of Maya is in you? You see, and you are allowing it to seep into the cracks in your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep consciousness, so that when you wake up in it, you go to sleep in it after a while. Sort of like this poor fellow, you see, who is under the problem of pratibhasakasata, unreal or apparent dream reality. He's enjoying, in a nice, wonderful way, all the fruits and happinesses that the 3 worlds can give him, particularly his own watery world in that case. But he comes in contact with the power of obstruction, pratibandhika. So pratibhasakasata, unreal or dream reality of the projection of that elephant there, and then the crocodile of the power of obstruction catches a hold of him, and he weeps, he cries. Then he cries out, "O save me, to pratibha, the self-aware intelligence, and it comes to him in the form of the Lord, Vishnu, riding on Garuda. Garuda, of course, is the vehicle of prana that's under control, and Ishvara there is the chosen ideal, as we were talking about in the last chart, is called pratibha. Well, that pratibha is the intelligence inside of you. It's very much like this highest imperium, the supreme bliss hidden in the cave of the intellect. Sri Ramakrishna talked about it as with the metaphor of a flint. If you keep a flint in the river for 1,000 years and you come upon it, take it out, it's wet, right? You hit it on another rock, it strikes spark anyway. That's pratibha. There's no way that Maya or lifetimes or karmas or sankalpas or gods or goddesses or ancestors or anyone else can do to dim that pratibha, you see, that resides in the cave of the intellect. But if you don't know you have it and you're thinking yourself, I'm really just a match, you see. And I've been kept in a river, you see. And then when I'm taken out, you see, if I try and strike me, I'm just a bunch of mush, you know. No spark. Oh, but wait, there's hope. I can take that match out of the river, out of the water, put it in the sun, because that match has sulfur in it, you see, and so forth. It has the power of striking. It's just wet and sodden with the permeation of Maya right now. But if I put it in the sun of knowledge, it'll dry out that match, and then it will strike sparks, you see. And that pratibha comes forward as the inherent power. And flint-like intelligence, you see, Sri Ramakrishna said. So you want to get a hold of that. Let's see, the supreme imperium. Same that was in the Buddha Yoga, same that was in the knowledge sacrifice, same that's in the Dharma, same that's in the Atmagyan, same that's in the Vigyan, you see. So that's what you want. Otherwise, all around you here is pratibandhika bhava, the power of intelligence which removes instructions. That, you see one of his arms has this chakra, right? And he's famous. It's called Sudarshan, I think, Vishnu's chakra. So he uses Sudarshan to throw it at the demons and dispatch them. So cries out, save me, I will, here I come, you're going to be all right. Casts his chakra, cuts off the head of the crocodile of pratibandhika, and the obstruction is gone, you see. So how, again, if you want to go back to it, how grace and self-effort work hand in hand. See, have to have all those elements in there. So it's going to require that you have your wits about you, if you want to put it that way. See, that you have the courage of your convictions, that you're not going to give up, you see, and stop the quest or fail the goal. You want to remain on vigil, as Swami Brahmananda said, Vivekananda's disciple. Remain on vigil. He wrote a book called Vigil. That each day you remind yourself of this particular mental posture, if you will, that you must keep that day, you see. To remind yourself of your true nature, because if you go out in it, you know, there's pain, there's suffering, there's karma, there's sankalpas, there's collective karma. There's all sorts of things that you can come upon. You might find yourself standing in line for 2 hours, like I did yesterday. See? Only to convince me that I had a birth. I was trying to get a birth certificate, to get a driver's license, to drive a car, when I don't move. So all of these Mayic things are all around you in different forms. What else? Lord Buddha puts it nicely here. It's a quick study, but it's a very effective one, you see. Pretty much goes to this Empyrean, highest Empyrean, doesn't it? The pratibha is a flint-like intelligence. It's like the Atman. You might see it's like the particle that shines, flows, these particles that flow off the Atman, or off of Brahman, like the sun, like the sun's rays. Lord Buddha said it nicely too. Gods, goddesses, father and mother, any kind of kith and kin cannot confer greater benefit on you than that of a well-directed intelligence. He said at the end of his life, you may call me anything, you may think anything about me, but what you must know about me that's essential is that I am awakened intelligence. Buddha. Bodhi. There's no matter of happenstance, you see, that he sat under the Bodhi tree to get his enlightenment. This intelligence is incomprehensible and exceedingly subtle. It wanders wherever and whenever it desires. Therefore the wise ones carefully watch over this intelligence which resides in the cavern of the heart. Interesting, huh? And utilize it to free themselves from the shackles of Maya. Cave of the heart, cavern of the heart. I shouldn't have much trouble making that connection. It's the same thing. And one was said by Varuna, and one was said by Lord Buddha. You see, hundreds, maybe several thousand years apart. So they're thinking the same all the way through these flows of time, these phases of time. They're thinking the same. They're keeping the same wisdom, keeping their center, and coming into the body to tell others about it, keeping the Dharma alive and well. Now, back a minute. This intelligence is incomprehensible and exceedingly subtle. So here's the rub on it. We know that most people don't possess it, or if they do possess it, they don't know about it. Thick as a brick, as much awareness as a dead bush. There's different things that come to me in the case of some very stupid people. See, Srimad Devi Bhagavatam, the goddess looks at these people and says, "Oh, you stupids." So why don't they waken up? They have that pratibha somewhere inside of them, hopefully buried under mounds of earth, Sri Ramakrishna said. But the wise ones just buried under a few pebbles. See, you brush away a few pebbles and there's their gold shining. See? So we want to keep it that much on the surface. Surface things generally are not very helpful for us, but this is very good to keep on the surface. Christ said, what would it behoove a man to gain a great light and then hide it under a bushel? See, why should you hide this light away? See, so you have to come out and pratibha with your pratibha, you see, and use it to realize God and to help others. That's the highest compassion, and that's wisdom's real purpose. What does knowledge do for you? What does worldly knowledge do for you? What does secular knowledge do for you? Make money and route you back into Maya, if you're not careful. But what does this higher wisdom do? See, it awakens you up to your true nature, helps you live a free life, a life of the Dharma, and develop your compassion, because compassion is one of the rarest of qualities. It develops very late in the game. Of qualities, daya, compassion, is the latest to arrive on the scene. Of practices and attainments, meditation is the last and latest to arrive on the scene. I remember saying that a year ago. I was thinking, what is the most precious and latest to mature of all qualities, and then what's the latest to mature of all attainments? Compassion and meditation. Those are late arrivers on the scene of spiritual life. That is, in any developed state, in any mature state. So these are things that you need to hold on for, and when they come, you need to hang on to them. There are many things you don't want to hang on to. There's a few things you can hang on to. The feet of the Lord might be one of those, right? Cling to the feet of the Lord. Help me, save me. And so you can no longer do anything but just save yourself. You see. Save yourself, I have other things to do, sometimes he says. So, power of intelligence. So this all in accord with this, these two slokas here about Manomaya Kosha and Vijnanamaya Kosha. And I think that's what I had to show you about them. Now, in the time remaining, acquaint myself with what's here. We move on to this final verse which we had yesterday. After doing austerity and meditating on those four koshas, he comes to understand that bliss is Brahman. That is, he found out food was Brahman, he found out prana was Brahman, he found out mind was Brahman, he found out intellect was Brahman. Now he's finding out that bliss was Brahman. You get the idea, right? It's not that when he found out that food was Brahman and then he found out prana was Brahman, that food wasn't Brahman anymore. And when he found out food and prana were Brahman, then he found out mind, and he found out that didn't mean that food and prana were not Brahman anymore. They're all Brahman. And so this is a comprehensive undertaking that Bhrigu, or any great and sincere student of Vedanta philosophy and higher truth, is going to take on over time and maintain it and achieve by stages. Check in with your own self every few days in meditation and check in with the scriptures to make sure that you're on track with that, you're on point. So he understood bliss was Brahman and found it in the highest imperium, hid in the heart. Then he commanded food, he gained assimilation to enjoy it, he became great in the world, progeny, cattle, so forth, and he became great in the effulgence born of sacred wisdom. He becomes great through renown issuing from righteous conduct. That's where we ended yesterday, and we've taken all those slokas we took yesterday and explained them with a chart. Going on, therefore the conclusion is a new sloka today. One should not disrespect or decry food. That should be observed as a pious rule. Life indeed is food. Body is the eater of food. Body is set in life, life is set in the body. Therefore, food is established in food. So that one who knows and contemplates food, which is established in food, becomes firmly established. He becomes the enjoyer of food, commander of plenty of food. In progeny and cattle and effulgence of sacred wisdom becomes great. Through renown for his righteous conduct he becomes great. So a repeat of the last sloka, only talking about the importance of food again, going back again. And here, continuing on in lesson 8. One should not reject food. That should be observed as a pious rule. Water indeed is food. Fire is the eater of food. Fire is established in water, and water is established in fire. Therefore, food is established in food. The one who knows and contemplates food, which is based on food, becomes firmly established, becomes the enjoyer of food, commands plenty of food, gets progeny, cattle, and effulgence born of sacred wisdom, he becomes great, and through renown issuing from this righteous contact, becomes great. Again, along the same line, lesson 9, I think. One should produce abundant food. Let that be observed as a pious vow. The earth indeed is food. Ether is the eater of food. Ether is established on the earth. The earth is established on ether. Therefore, food is established on food. And so, he who knows and contemplates food in this way, which is based in food, becomes firmly established, and so forth. He gets progeny, he gets cattle, he gets wealth, and he gets the effulgence of wisdom, and becomes known for his righteous conduct. So those 3 slokas pretty much a repeat, only taking the level of the 5 elements in now. So this is why specifically you need to concentrate, do some contemplation on the 24 cosmic principles, right? Because it starts with earth, and earth connects with smell, and then water connects with taste, fire connects with sight, air connects with touch or feeling, and then ether connects with hearing. So food is established in ether, ether is the eater of food, and ether is established on the earth, earth is established on ether. So ether holds everything here. Everything that's food to everyone else. Everything is a kind of food. So back to Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir. Now in the remaining time, which is just 15 minutes, we can show again this new chart. That is, most of you might not have seen it, but if you watched the live streaming in Hawaii before I came here about 2 or 3 weeks ago, you would have seen this chart appearing there. as one of the ways of explaining it. Now, there are the different cosmic principles, right? Hiranyagarbha is the Mahat, the Buddhi, the Hamkara, the Manas, the Chitta. That's the supreme mind. Tanmatras are Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, and Gandha. Those are the subtle elements. Jnanendriyas are the knowledge senses. Shravandriya, Sparshandriya, Chakshurandriya, Rasanandriya, and Granandriya. That means basically your senses, your knowledge senses. Seeing, tasting, touching, hearing, and smelling. Then the Karmandriyas are, of course, locomotion, procreation, and so forth. So here is a kind of familiar package that we know about called 24 Cosmic Principles. But what I've put here is that how it trickles down. So the name of this chart is Mother India's Revealed Scriptures on Earth. That's food for the gods. That's food for the rishis. That's food for the aspirant. The wisdom from the scriptures is a kind of food it's like a rare jet fuel or something. It's a rare kind of fuel that only certain kinds of pilots can operate on. You see, they take it in and they're able to fly, spiritually speaking, with that way. So look at how it falls from cosmic intelligence to cosmic mind to intellect to ego to mind to thought to audibility, tangibility, visibility, flavor, odor, down to hearing, feeling, seeing, tasting, smelling, to speaking, handling, locomotion, procreating, and excreting, to ether, air, fire, water, and earth. The whole thing spills out like that. And the orientation for this, like footsteps coming down out of the highest ether to establish food, all the scriptures have come. You see. And here's all the scriptures that are on my shelf at home. Plus, more could be added in, but these are the main ones. Now, it starts out as the Pancha Karana process in fives. It's called cosmic projection, and then it turns into a quintuplication in the three worlds, you see. Causal, subtle, and gross. So we've studied this before. Shankara says about it, the revealed scriptures and all the teachers of the world have their existence through the Atman. Faith, devotion, and constant communion with the wise, these are declared by the sacred scriptures to be the seeker's direct means of realizing it. That is the Atman. It is hard for any embodied being to achieve a human form, strength, and purity. More difficult still is the desire to live a spiritual life, and hardest of all is cultivating an ability to comprehend the Holy Scriptures, which is what I wrote you 2 or 3 weeks ago in an email. See, that's very difficult to develop a taste for the Holy Scriptures and the wisdom of the seers, and then what to speak of finding out how to eat it and how to digest it. You don't have a taste for it yet. Advaita Ashram on Ramakrishna order, you see, putting out all sorts of wonderful, wonderful books from the scriptures of Indian philosophy. But talking to the president a couple years ago, they're not selling. People aren't interested in the scriptures. Very hard, to send these out to people. So unless that trend changes, then people won't know how to be eaters of bliss, eaters of wisdom, and finally transcending all processes of knowledge and truth, as Krishna says in the Gita. Knowledge must end in truth. So you see how far that arrow has to travel to penetrate that target of Brahman. It has to be tried and true and shot with great strength, and it has to have perseverance in order to find its mark. So this whole thing evinces how the scriptures came to earth. You see, how this wisdom as food comes through all of this. What other purpose would there be for it? To enjoy? To suffer? To remain in ignorance? The one thing that has to go is ignorance. One thing that has to be alleviated is Maya, as far as possible. So this is the most important part for the revealed scriptures of Mother India. So as it comes down like that, 108 Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutras, those are 3 classics, you see. That's called Shruti, must be heard. These must be heard. Then you've got 4 Vedas, 18 Puranas, 64 Tantras, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Uddhava Gita, Narada's Bhakti Sutras, Sandilya's Bhakti Sutras, the Code of Manu, bringing up the rear. That's one scripture in India that's of a purely moral level. All the rest are of a religious and philosophical level. So these are then your auxiliary scriptures, you see, Smriti, as they were. These are to be heard and these are to help you. Other Smriti would be that pretty much covers what's on this chart. Srimad Devi Bhagavatam and the Chandi are the 2 mother scriptures. Those are rare in the world. There's only 2 in the whole world, and they're in India. You don't find scriptures from the mother path anywhere else. Find some teachings on Mother Mary, some teachings on Fatima in Islam, but where are the mother scriptures from her? You see, there are 2 of them, and they're in India. Srimad Devi Bhagavatam and the Chandi. So if you are a mother devotee or a Shakta, then you probably want to look into those scriptures, find out what she's saying. Then you have these darshanas. The Tattva Samasa Sutras are the only scriptures left from Samkhya Yoga. And we don't even know who is the author. Probably some of the students of Kapila put those out. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, classic darshana. Jivan Mukti Viveka, an Advaita Vedanta text. Panchadasi, a classic Advaita Vedanta text. The Dhammapada, that's the Buddhist, that is Indian Buddhism, that's its text. And, guess what? What we just studied on part of a chart, Yoga Vashishta. Those are exemplary scriptures. Now up here you have the purely non-dual. Ashtavakra Samhita, Avadhuta Gita, Adhyatma Ramayana, and Gaudapadi's Karika would be good representations of the purely non-dual. We've had retreats on Gaudapada's Karika, which comes out of the 108 Upanishads, really, his commentary on one of them. Now, these are all an amazing soul put these together, called Shankara, in 700 AD. He was an Amsa avatar. He not only commented on the scriptures of the past, he contributed some dozen or more. Some of those are Viveka Chudamani, his best known, Aparokshanubhuti, knowledge of the self, direct experience, Drig Drishya Viveka, the discrimination of the seer and the seen, Atma Bodha, self-knowledge, Tattva Bodha, knowledge of principles, Vedanta Keshari, Prapanchasara, Atma Anatma Viveka, the discrimination between the self and the non-self, Moha Mudgara, and the Vakyavritti. What's the Moha Mudgara?
Something about delusion.
The hammer that pounds away delusion is the actual. But
Oh, that's the no, that's the Vajagovindam.
that's Bhaja Govindam, isn't it? That's the hammer that pounds away all delusion. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Mudamate, Samprapte Sanihite Kare, Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukren Karene, Bhaja Govindam. Its name is Mohamudgara. The whole Bhaja Govindam of its 32 verses, 12 of them written by Shankara and the other 14 plus written by his disciples over time. So you would study that scripture to find out the teachings of worship the Lord, and everything that means. Now, I had to put in the 2 most current, Gospel of Ramakrishna and the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Those have to be included because it's the Kali Yuga, the Kali Avatar has come, and these 2 remarkable documents, what to speak of a host of other, like Eternal Companion and Alila Prasanga and all these other great scriptures that have come out of Ramakrishna's direct disciples and the extended spiritual family of some 5 million souls now to date. Those 2 would be mandatory for Ramakrishna disciples. It's Gospel of Ramakrishna, nice and thick, can take a long time, you can I Ching it, you can read it over time, you can read it many times. And then if you just want to do one reading of Swamiji's complete works in this lifetime, that would be a mind-transforming thing to do. You won't think the same ever again, and it's probably a good thing. Well, somebody was telling me last night at our dinner for Guru Purnam Puja afterwards, says, I have the complete Swami Vivekananda's works on my cell phone. And all of a sudden I had a better estimation of cell phones. I said, do you read them? Well, no, but they're there. So, good. Hopefully you'll be dialing up something and, get God's number. And you'll start reading Vivekananda's complete works. And these are not books he wrote. That's the beautiful thing about Vivekananda's works, is that he spoke them, and they were taken down by a few very adept stenographers and so forth. And so when he gave these talks, then they wrote these down, and then later they were collected in this massive work, 14 volumes now or something. And so they're straight from the horse's mouth, as we say, on all the subjects of spirituality. That's why we would, and we don't have time for it, show this chart, which we've actually used as the grounds for an entire retreat before. And you can see that it means qualification as king, means that he's going to teach you Vedanta. He wants you to learn Vedanta and its main points. Yoga and its main points, Samkhya and its main points, Buddhism and its main points, Tantra and its main points, Kundalini Yoga and its main points, and Vishishta Yoga and its main points. And these are how to qualify yourself in this way to fulfill this process. Now you're thinking about it all as food, right? As far as the Taittiriya Upanishad is concerned, it's all food. And all the 5 koshas must eat, you see. And they all must digest what they eat and arrive at good health. So may we all experience good health. May our life force flow unimpeded. May our minds expand in this capacity to know Brahman. Because the Upanishads state that all existence is Brahman. Therefore, may we never deny Brahman. May Brahman never deny us. May there be no rejection of Brahman ever by us, we who are dedicated to the realization of the Atman within. And may all the divine qualities cited in the Upanishads and all the scriptures reside firmly within us. May we be established in them. May they be established in us. May we therefore possess food, enjoy food, become distributors of food, and become great, and become realized in this lifetime. Om Sato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrichor Ma Amritam Gamaya Abhira Maiti Rudraya Te Dakshinamukam Te Namam Pahi Nityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from darkness to light, from lower truth to higher truth, from the unreal to the real, and from the illusion of death to eternal life. Reach us through and through, O Lord and Mother of the universe, with thy sweet and benign presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari